The night Han Sojin chose another woman, I was wearing white. Not because I believed I was the bride. I wore white because it was his favorite color on me, and because after 3 years of loving him in silence, I still remembered every small thing that made his eyes soften. The perfume he noticed, the tea he drank when he could not sleep, the scar beneath his left shoulder that ached whenever it rained, the exact moment his expression changed before he lied. I knew Han Sojin better than the people who carried guns for him, better than the relatives who shared his name, better, perhaps, than he knew himself. But when I entered his engagement party on the 42nd floor of the Grand Hyatt Seoul, he looked through me as if those 3 years had never happened. The entire city glittered beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows. Crystal chandeliers burned above tables, crowded with politicians, executives, old money families, and men whose names were never printed beside the businesses they controlled. This was Sojin's public world. I had only ever been allowed inside his private one. In private, he reached for my hand. In public, I was introduced as a family friend. In private, he said I was the only person who understood him. In public, he stood beside Park Yuna, while photographers captured the beginning of their respectable future. I should have known the first time he dropped my hand when someone entered the room. I should have known the first time he asked me to leave through a side entrance. But love can make secrecy feel sacred when it is really just shame wearing softer clothes. 3 weeks before the party, Sojin had called me at 2 in the morning. "Come to the penthouse," he said. "There is something you should hear from me." When I arrived, he was standing beside the windows with his back to the city. He did not kiss me. He did not ask whether I had arrived safely. He simply gestured toward the chair across from him, as though I were attending a business meeting. "My family has finalized an arrangement with the Parks," he said. I stared at him. What arrangement? His expression remained controlled. "My engagement to Yuna will be announced next month." I waited for him to continue. He did not. "And what was I?" I asked. For exactly 4 seconds, Han Sojin said nothing. I counted every one. Then he looked at me and said, "You were real." Were. One word, and suddenly 3 years had a grave. "But this is necessary," he continued. "The Park Alliance protects the organization's future. My mother has expectations. There are obligations attached to my name that neither of us can ignore. You ignored them every night you called me." His jaw tightened. "That was different." "No," I said. "It was hidden." He looked away. "That hurt more than the engagement. You said I was the only person you trusted. You are. You said you could breathe when you were with me. I can. You said Nia." The way he spoke my name ended the conversation. Not loudly. Sojin never needed volume to make a room obey him. 3 days later, an invitation arrived at my apartment. Heavy cream paper. Black embossed lettering. "The Han and Park families request the honor of your presence." I read it 6 times. Perhaps he wanted me there so I would accept the finality. Perhaps he wanted to prove to himself that he could choose duty while I watched. Or perhaps some selfish part of him could not imagine beginning a new life without making certain I was somewhere inside the room. I attended because I needed to see the truth without his careful explanations wrapped around it. You cannot heal from what you keep allowing yourself to misunderstand. The moment I entered the ballroom, conversation faltered. Not completely. Just enough. Heads turned. Eyes moved over my white dress, my dark skin, my invitation, and the fact that I had arrived alone. People in Sojin's world had seen me before. Entering his penthouse. Leaving private restaurants. Sitting close enough to him at unofficial dinners for rumors to survive, but never close enough to appear in photographs. They knew what I had been. They also knew what I was not. His lieutenant, Kang Taeyang, intercepted me near the entrance. Taeyang had spent 3 years treating me with the careful tolerance powerful men reserve for women they believe are temporary. "This is not a good idea," he said. I was invited. You were informed. I met his eyes. There is a difference. He waited for me to retreat. I did not. Finally, he stepped aside. "Do not embarrass yourself," he murmured. I walked past him. Sojin stood beside the windows with Yuna's hand resting lightly against his arm. She wore pale blue. She was elegant, polished, and completely at ease, the kind of woman who had never needed to explain why she belonged in a room. Her family had spent 4 generations making certain she would never have to. Sojin saw me. For a fraction of a second, something passed through his eyes. Then it disappeared. No surprise. No guilt. No visible recognition of the woman who had spent 3 years protecting parts of him no one else knew existed. He turned toward a photographer. That was when I understood. He had not invited me because he loved me. He had invited me because erasing me would feel more complete if I witnessed it. I turned toward the exit. Madame Hans stepped into my path. Sojun's mother was 63, immaculate and rigid, with a voice sharpened by decades of never being challenged. "I do not know what you imagined you were to my son," she said. Her voice was loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. Several conversations stopped. I remained still. "But you should understand something before you leave. Women like you often mistake the attention of a powerful man for a permanent decision. Women like me." She left the meaning hanging between us so no one could accuse her of saying it plainly. "Sojun has responsibilities," she continued, "to his family, to his bloodline, to a legacy that existed long before you entered his life." I looked toward him. He was watching. "Whatever affection he showed you privately," she said, "does not change the distance between your world and ours." The room had become silent. Not because anyone intended to defend me, because humiliation is entertainment when it happens to someone a room has already decided does not belong. "You should be grateful he told you himself," Madame Hans said. "A man in his position could have simply disappeared." "Mother." Sojun's voice came from behind her. For one foolish second, hope moved inside me. He approached slowly and stopped at his mother's side. He did not stand beside me. He did not ask her to apologize. He did not tell the room that I had spent 3 years holding together pieces of his empire none of them knew had ever been in danger. He looked at me with the same expression he used when ending a negotiation. "You should go," he said. "This is not a place for you." The first laugh came from somewhere behind Taeyang. Soft. Then another voice. She actually came wearing white. A woman near the second table whispered, "Maybe she thought he would change his mind." Someone else answered, "He kept her because she was convenient." Taeyang did not lower his voice. 3 years following a man who never chose her. I looked at Sojun. He heard them. He let them continue. That was the moment the love ended. Not when he became engaged. Not when his mother insulted me. It ended when he saw me standing alone in a room full of people enjoying my pain and decided his silence was worth more than my dignity. I did not cry. I have never cried in front of people who would consider my tears proof that they had measured me correctly. I looked at Madame Han, then Taeyang, then Yuna. Finally, I looked at Sojun. "Enjoy your evening," I said. I walked out with my shoulders straight. The elevator descended 42 floors in complete silence. At the 20th floor, my knees began to shake. At the 12th, I placed one hand against the wall. At the 5th, I closed my eyes and heard my father's voice from years earlier. "Never make permanent decisions while someone else is enjoying your humiliation." When the doors opened, I stepped into the lobby. I did not look back. But before leaving the hotel, I made myself one promise. Every person in that room will remember tonight, not as a threat, as a commitment to the woman I would become next. Because the people upstairs did not know what I had done for Han Sojun. They did not know that 1 year earlier, his organization had been 6 weeks from regulatory exposure that could have dismantled everything his family had built. They did not know I had used relationships from my father's network to stop it. 1 call to Accra, 3 meetings in London, a favor collected from someone who had owed my family for 15 years. 40 years of political capital spent in a single week. I never told Sojun. I did not save him for praise. I saved him because I loved him. He believed his empire had survived through his own intelligence. He had no idea the woman he had just ordered out of his engagement party was the reason it still existed. Before we go any further, I need you to do something. If you have ever watched a loyal woman get treated as disposable while everyone benefited from what she gave, comment, "I see her." Do not scroll past this quietly. Somewhere, a woman is listening who has been made to feel invisible for years. Let her open these comments and discover she is not alone. And subscribe now, not for me, but because stories about women rebuilding themselves only reach the women who need them when people like you refuse to stay silent. That night was 2 years ago. They thought it was my ending. It was the night I began building theirs. The most dangerous thing in the world is not an angry woman. Anger is loud, Anger reveals where it plans to strike. The most dangerous thing is a patient woman who has stopped explaining herself. 3 days after the engagement party, I left Seoul. I did not return to the apartment in Itaewon, where Sojin had visited me after midnight and left before sunrise. I went home. Accra welcomed me with gold morning light, red earth and air that smelled like rain arriving from the coast. My father found me sitting alone on the veranda on my third morning. Charles Osei was 71 and had spent 4 decades building relationships across governments, banks, ports, development institutions, and private capital networks on 3 continents. He never advertised power. People who possessed the real kind rarely did. He sat across from me and poured tea. For several minutes, he said nothing. Then he asked, "What do you need?" Not what happened, not whether I was all right. My father knew I would speak when I was ready. I told him everything. The engagement, the invitation, Madame Han, the laughter, Sojin turning away. When I finished, he remained quiet. "You could leave this behind," he said eventually. "You could build something extraordinary without touching a single part of his world." I know, but that is not what you came home to do. No. He studied me. Is this punishment? Accountability. Those words can become the same thing if you are not careful. I know. What does the life beyond this look like? I answered immediately. My own institution. Clean capital. Developments that do not rely on inherited access. Investments across Africa and Asia. A company that still exists when Han Sojin is only a line in its history. My father nodded once. Then you are not trapped. He placed his cup down. We build properly. No shortcuts. No illegal methods. No reckless destruction. When you return to Seoul, you will not return as a wounded woman asking them to reconsider your value. His eyes held mine. You will return as something they do not have a category for. Obsidian Capital was registered 8 months later. The first investors came through my father's network, but the strategy was mine. I had spent 3 years listening while Sojin discussed acquisitions beside me as though I were furniture. I knew the expansion corridors he wanted. I knew which partnerships depended on personal loyalty rather than binding agreements. I knew which properties his organization needed to control before approaching certain international institutions. Most importantly, I knew what he underestimated. Visibility. Han Sojin believed power always announced itself. Black cars. Armed men. Family names engraved on buildings. He did not understand power that moved quietly through holding companies, investment committees, and relationships older than his organization's most valuable division. For 14 months, Obsidian Capital acquired everything his team intended to approach next. A Mapo development parcel, a logistics stake in Incheon, commercial property in Hannam, a hospitality consortium he believed was still undecided. One by one, doors began closing before his people arrived. Each loss had a reasonable explanation. A stronger offer, a change in development strategy, a partner choosing international financing. Nothing could be traced directly to me. That mattered. I did not want Sojin to fear a ghost forever. I wanted him to understand exactly who had been standing in front of him the entire time. But first, I needed him uncertain. Uncertainty makes powerful men reveal information certainty keeps hidden. 18 months after the party, one of my sources sent me a recording from an emergency meeting at Han Organization headquarters. Sojin's voice was controlled. Who is Obsidian Capital? Silence. Why are they present in every corridor we have identified for expansion? No one answered. Taeyang finally said, "We have confirmed international capitalization, but the ownership structure is layered. No visible principal. Find one. We are trying." "No," Sojin replied. "You have been reacting. I told you to investigate." I stopped the recording. For 18 months, I had imagined what that moment might feel like. I expected satisfaction. Instead, I felt calm. The kind that arrives when the last piece of a mechanism locks into place. One move remained before I let him see my face. The Yawido property was the foundation of Sojin's next empire. 300,000 square feet overlooking the Han River. His proposed luxury hotel, private residences and members-only business club would have transformed the Han Organization from a feared local institution into an internationally respectable development group. He had spent 8 months negotiating the acquisition. His team believed the closing meeting was a formality. They arrived at 10 in the morning. I was waiting in the lobby. Cream suit, black heels. Obsidian's acquisition documents in my hand. Taeyang entered first with 3 attorneys behind him. He walked 6 steps before recognizing me. Then he stopped. His expression shifted through confusion, memory, and disbelief. You. Nia Osei, I said, Chief Executive of Obsidian Capital. His eyes dropped to the folder. Then back to my face. You are Obsidian? I believe your team is here regarding the Uedo property. We are finalizing the acquisition. You were negotiating the acquisition. A member of my legal team handed me the completed documents. Obsidian closed 3 weeks ago. The transfer became effective this morning. Taeyang stared at me. That is impossible. The seller preferred our terms. You interfered with an active negotiation. No. We made a better offer. His composure cracked. Call Sojin, he told one of his men. I expected you would. Han Sojin arrived 19 minutes later. The lobby changed when he entered. It always had. But this time, the room did not belong to him. He walked toward me in a dark coat, his expression unreadable. The same face I had once studied across midnight dinners. The same eyes that had watched his mother humiliate me. He stopped several feet away. Nia. Hello, Sojin. He looked at the acquisition documents. Then at Taeyang. Finally, his eyes returned to me. You are Obsidian Capital. I am. The Mapo development. Mine. The Hanam acquisition. Also mine. The Gangnam partnership that withdrew in March. I advised them to reconsider their exposure. His jaw tightened. The Hospitality Consortium? They selected our structure. He stared at me as the pattern completed itself. How long? 14 months of active operations. 18 months of preparation. You did all of this because of me? No. The answer visibly unsettled him. I built Obsidian because of me. Your organization happened to occupy several positions I required. Taeyang stepped forward. You bought one property and think you can stand here as though I turned toward him. He stopped speaking. I remember you, I said. You told me not to embarrass myself. His face hardened. I also remember what you said after Madame Han finished. I was protecting the organization. No. You were entertaining a room. 3 members of my executive team entered from the corridor and took their positions behind me. My attorney, my operations director, my head of acquisitions. No weapons, no raised voices. Only documents powerful enough to make Sojin's armed men irrelevant. Taeyang glanced toward them, then toward Sojin. For the first time since I had known him, he appeared unsure which person in the room possessed the authority to end the conversation. Sojin's eyes remained on me. What do you want? I want you to understand that every deal you lost was not bad luck. I stepped closer. Every partner who withdrew. Every property sold before your team arrived. Every territory already occupied when you attempted to expand. I paused. That was me. He searched my face for grief, for anger, for the woman who once waited for his calls. She was gone. I am not here because you broke me, I said. I am here because I became whole without you, and because what you took requires an answer proportionate to its cost. I handed the acquisition folder to my attorney. Obsidian will contact your legal team regarding our continued presence in the development corridors your organization requires. I picked up my bag. They should rest today. Beginning tomorrow, they will be very busy. I walked toward the elevator. Behind me, Taeyang began speaking urgently. Sojin said nothing. The doors closed. 2 years earlier, I had leaned against that elevator wall because I could barely remain standing. This time, I stood in the center. When the doors opened, I called my operations director. Begin the reconciliation phase. Sojin called that evening. I did not answer. He called again and again. On the 4th attempt, I accepted. I need to see you, he said. I know. We met at a private restaurant in Cheongdam-dong. He chose it because he believed it was neutral territory. There is no neutral territory when one person needs something the other controls. He stood when I approached. For a moment, I remembered the man I had loved. Not with longing, with accuracy. He had been gentle in private. That was what made his cruelty in public so efficient. He sat across from me. I made a mistake, he said. Yes. My engagement to Yuna was an arrangement. You still agreed to it. My family required. You were the head of the organization. His mouth closed. The only person in that room who could have stopped what happened was you, I said. Your mother spoke because she knew you would allow it. Taeyang laughed because he knew you would reward his loyalty. The guests joined because your silence told them I was safe to humiliate. His eyes lowered for half a second. I thought I was protecting what my family built. You protected it from the woman who had already saved it. He looked up sharply. I allowed the sentence to remain unexplained. Not yet. He shifted to business. What you have built is extraordinary. Thank you. Obsidian and the Hahn organization could dominate the city's development market together. There it was. He leaned forward, softening his voice. The warmth was familiar. Once, it would have felt like intimacy. Now I recognized it as technique. We understand each other, he said, better than anyone else ever could. No, I replied. I understood you. You rarely attempted to understand me. Something flickered behind his eyes. Still, I let him continue. He proposed a strategic partnership, joint access to development corridors, shared international financing. Obsidian's clean institutional structure supporting projects the Hahn organization could not take through conventional scrutiny. He needed my capital, my family's credibility, my relationships. And he believed the shortest path to those things was the woman he had once trained to respond whenever he made her feel chosen. I will review it, I said. For 3 weeks, I allowed him to believe reconciliation was possible. I attended meetings. I asked questions. I permitted his team to present projections. Each presentation revealed another dependency. A debt facility vulnerable to review. A territory alliance approaching renewal. A hidden reliance on property intelligence originally introduced through my father's network. Taeyang became careless. One of my sources heard him say, "She still loves him. She will fold." I smiled when the message reached me. A man who has never respected a woman's intelligence will always mistake her patience for surrender. At our final meeting, Sojin arrived early. He had already ordered my preferred tea. Jasmine, no sugar. The small detail was designed to remind me that he remembered. He did not understand that memory without respect is only surveillance. "I think we are close," he said. "We are." Relief moved through his expression. There is something separate from the partnership I need to say. I waited. I have thought about that night every day. You should. I should have stopped my mother. Yes, I should have followed you. You did not. I should have chosen you. I folded my hands. You are still framing this as a choice between women. He stared at me. The real choice, I said, was between integrity and convenience. You chose convenience. He leaned back. For the first time that evening, uncertainty entered the room. I placed a closed folder on the table. Over the last 3 weeks, your team has disclosed enough operational information for my analysts to complete their map of your remaining dependencies. His face went still. The debt instruments, the Gangbook Alliance, the Mapo Consortium, your remaining hospitality partners, Nia. I did not attend these meetings to form a partnership. The silence stretched. I attended them to discover what you had left. His hand tightened around his cup. You were never going to agree. Did you truly believe that after everything, I was still simple enough to be managed the same way twice? I stood. Tomorrow morning, Obsidian begins the final phase. His voice followed me. You said you were open to a conversation. I was. I looked back. You gave me exactly the conversation I needed. The collapse did not happen in one dramatic explosion. Real power rarely disappears that way. It leaves piece by piece until the person standing at the center finally notices the room has become empty. At 9 the next morning, the Mapo Consortium announced Obsidian Capital as its strategic anchor. At 11, the bank holding 3 of the Hahn organization's largest debt instruments issued a formal review notice. At 1, 2 international partners suspended negotiations. At 2, Director Bake entered Hahn headquarters. For 6 years, the Gangbuck Territory Alliance had been Sojin's most important external partnership. Director Bake did not betray him. I never asked him to. I showed him that the infrastructure required for his next stage of growth ran through institutions the Hahn organization could no longer access. Then I offered him a future. Sojin entered the meeting believing they were renegotiating terms. Director Bake informed him that the alliance was transferring its primary relationship to Obsidian Capital, effective immediately. I later received the security footage. Sojin sat at the head of the conference table. Taeyang stood behind him. Director Bike closed his folder and left. One by one, the remaining representatives followed. No shouting. No threats. Only chairs sliding backward and footsteps moving toward the door. Within 2 minutes, the vast conference room was empty except for Sojun and Taiyang. The city skyline stretched behind them, the same skyline that had once framed his engagement party. Sojun remained seated. Taiyang waited for an instruction. None came. That was the first time I saw what defeat looked like on Han Sojun. Not rage. Stillness. The paralysis of a man who had spent his life believing rooms emptied because he dismissed people, not because people had discovered they no longer needed him. Taiyang called me that afternoon. You need to stop. His voice remained controlled, but something beneath it was breaking. Why? You are dismantling 3 generations of work. No, I said. I am separating what your organization built from what it obtained through my relationships, my labor, and my silence. You think humiliation justifies this? No. Your continued use of assets acquired through my family's network justifies this. You are destroying him. Taeyang, you stood in that ballroom and helped a room destroy a woman because you believed she had no power to answer. He said nothing. You were wrong. I paused. Tell Sojun I will meet him tomorrow. Tell him to bring Yuna. Why? Because she deserves to hear what she was selected for. They arrived at Obsidian's headquarters the following morning. Sojun entered first. Yuna walked behind him. Their engagement had never become a marriage. The public explanation was scheduling. The truth sat in the careful distance between them. I invited them to sit. Then I looked at Yuna. You knew about me. Yes, she said. No denial. No performance. I knew there had been someone. I did not know everything. You knew enough to understand that the engagement required my disappearance. Her expression tightened. Yes, and you knew he did not love you. Sojun turned toward her. Yuna let her finish. Her voice surprised him. I continued. He needed your family's name. The Park lineage provided social legitimacy the Han organization could not purchase, regardless of its influence. Yuna's eyes remained on mine. He selected you for what you represented, I said. The same way he selected me when my relationships and loyalty were useful. That is not what happened, Sojun said. I turned toward him. 3 years ago, your organization was 6 weeks from regulatory collapse. The room became still. An investigation had reached the point where 2 senior officials were prepared to authorize a coordinated action against your financial and property divisions. Taeyang was not present, but I could imagine his expression if he had heard it. I contacted my father. We used a relationship in London to reach an intermediary in Singapore who opened a channel to the appropriate authority. The investigation was redirected, the exposure contained, and your organization survived. Sojun stared at me. You did that? Yes. Why did no one tell me? Because I ensured they could not trace it back to me. Why? I did not want credit. My voice remained level. I loved you. I believed protecting what mattered to you was worth the cost. Yuna turned toward him slowly. She saved your organization. He did not answer. While you were arranging our engagement, Yuna continued, she was protecting you. I did not know. You did not ask, I said. Yuna looked down at her engagement ring. Then she removed it. Sojun's expression changed. Yuna. She placed the ring on the table. I agreed to this because our families called it duty, she said. I believed affection might grow inside obligation. She stood. But I will not remain in an arrangement built on the humiliation of another woman, especially when that woman was the reason there was still an organization for my family to join. She turned to me. I am sorry. I studied her. For what happened in that room, she continued. For knowing enough to question it and deciding comfort was easier. Her apology did not erase anything. But it belonged to her, not to me. I nodded once. Yuna walked out. Sojun did not stop her. When the door closed, he reached across the table. The movement was instinctive. 3 years of muscle memory trying to locate my hand. I moved it before he could touch me. Nia, what happens next cannot be stopped. I did not know what you had done. You knew what I had given. He flinched. You knew I gave you 3 years. You knew I stood beside you when no one else could reach you. You knew I protected your secrets, strengthened your negotiations, and used relationships you never bothered to ask about. I leaned back. You did not need to know the size of my sacrifice to treat me like a human being. His face changed then. Not because he had lost the properties. Not because Yuna had left. Because there was no argument available to him. No obligation, no family expectation, no business calculation, only the truth. He had accepted everything I gave while refusing to acknowledge me in the one room where acknowledgement would have cost him something. Sojin made one final move. Through unofficial channels, the Han organization began presenting Obsidian as an aggressive foreign entity attempting to seize Korean institutions. It was intelligent. He understood that if he could not defeat my capital, he could attempt to isolate it socially. For 24 hours, the narrative gained traction. Several local partners requested clarification. 2 meetings were postponed. Business reporters began asking whether Obsidian's expansion represented hostile external interference. Then my father arrived in Seoul. Charles Osei rarely travelled for spectacle. His presence meant something required the full weight of his name. At 2 in the afternoon, he stood before the press at the Lotte Hotel. I watched from my office. He spoke for 11 minutes. He described Obsidian's capital structure, its regulatory compliance, its relationships with sovereign wealth funds, central banks, trade institutions and development organizations across 14 countries. Then he placed both hands on the podium. 2 years ago, he said, my daughter used the full weight of this family's political capital to protect an organization in this city from a crisis that would have ended it. Every camera remained fixed on him. She requested no recognition. She permitted no public record. She acted because she loved the man leading that organization. My father paused. Afterward, she stood in a room while his family described her as a woman who did not understand the distance between her world and theirs. His expression did not change. I wished to clarify that distance. The room became completely silent. The Osei network has participated in the financial architecture of this region longer than several institutions currently questioning my daughter's legitimacy have existed. He looked directly into the cameras. My daughter did not enter Han Sojin's world. A pause. She condescended to spend 3 years inside a version of it considerably smaller than the one she came from and infinitely smaller than the one she has since built. By the time the press conference ended, 3 postponed meetings had been restored. The Gangbook Alliance confirmed its transition to Obsidian. The Uido Consortium requested that we take the lead position on the entire development. My operations director called. Han's legal team is requesting terms. I looked across Seoul from my office window. Full withdrawal from the 3 primary corridors. She began taking notes. Transfer of the 2 properties acquired using intelligence introduced through my family's network. And the public narrative? A formal acknowledgement that Obsidian has operated lawfully and independently. He will resist that. He can resist, I said. He cannot refuse. He signed the following Thursday. At 6:17 in the evening, my attorney sent one word. Done. I placed my phone on the desk. For 18 months, I had imagined victory as something loud. A room applauding. Sojin begging. Madam Han watching me take the position she believed I could never hold. Instead, victory arrived quietly. No music, no cheering, only the city beneath my window and the realization that the weight I had carried since the engagement party no longer belonged to me. I thought about the woman in the elevator. 42 floors, one hand against the wall, one promise. Every person in that room will remember tonight. They remembered. But more importantly, I did. I remembered who I had been before Sojin's family tried to define me. He did not create my strength. He revealed the circumstances under which I would finally be forced to use it. I will not thank him for that. Pain is not a gift simply because you survive it. What he did was wrong. It cost me 2 years I will never romanticize. 142 mornings of building through anger before the anger became discipline. Countless nights when I questioned whether my success would still belong to me if too much of it had been shaped in response to him. But I kept imagining the life beyond him. That saved me. Obsidian was no longer a weapon. It was an institution. My institution. The Regional Investment Summit would take place in November inside a building that had once been first on Sojin's expansion list. The Saturday Education Fund I created would provide training and capital to immigrant women building businesses in Seoul. Our next development would include a textile and arts center connecting Korean artisans with designers from Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. My future had expanded beyond the size of his regret. 3 weeks after he signed the final agreement, Sojin called. I answered. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. What my mother said that night, he began. Sojin, What I allowed, Sojin. He stopped. I do not need your accounting, I said. I have already settled mine. Another long silence. Are you well? He asked. I looked around my office, at the acquisition plans, the textile center proposal. The photograph of my father and me taken the morning Obsidian opened its first office. I am exceptional. I ended the call. Then I returned to work. Because women like me do not wait forever to be chosen. We do not spend our lives competing for rooms that have already decided we are decorative rather than structural. We do not shrink so insecure people can appear larger beside us. We build. We build until the doors once closed in our faces open before we reach them. We build until people who treated our loyalty as weakness are forced to negotiate with the strength that loyalty could have protected. And when they finally understand what they lost, we do not return merely because regret has taught them our value. We keep walking. If you reached this moment, do not leave silently. Comment SHE Built Her Owen Tabler so every woman reading knows that rejection is not the end of her story. Someone listening tonight is still sitting in the room where she was humiliated, believing the people who rejected her were correct. Your comment may be the one that reminds her to stand up. And subscribe before you leave. Not subscribing means the next story about a woman choosing herself may never reach the person who desperately needs to hear it. This channel grows only when viewers who believe women deserve dignity refuse to watch quietly and disappear. Join us, turn on notifications, and be here when the next woman walks back into the room they said she would never own.